how do I grow my career and my family at the same time without losing myself in the process? The equation has three variables: work and home and you. And when the first two get heavy enough or big enough, the third one is the one that gets sort of quietly, like almost invisibly sacrificed. I do think you have to make choices differently. And you have to sort of flip the order in which you're making choices. And that flip is the thing that really changes everything. The goal is never some kind of perfect artificial balance, right? The goal is a life that has room for you in the middle of it. Hello, and welcome back to the Brilliant Balance Podcast. Today's episode is one that I have been wanting to do for a while because the question at the center of this episode is really one that I hear more than just about any other. So I've thought about it, like I've talked about this from every angle, all the edges and sides of the subtopics under this, but this is like the central thesis of Brilliant Balance. And it's an episode that I haven't done in quite this way. And the question is really, how do I grow my career and my family at the same time without losing myself in the process? And it's so interesting to me because when you say that to someone who's not in like the core target audience for this show, they're like, what do you mean lose yourself? And I think, oh my Lord, anyone who's listening to the show that is really in the audience does not need to have that explained to them, right? Like we know what it means to lose yourself in the process. And that really is the core question. How do I show up fully as a mother without falling behind professionally, right? How do I lean fully into my career without feeling like I'm shortchanging the members of my family who need me? And how do I do both of those things and not have nothing left over for myself? To have to sort of put my own interests and my own passions on ice for, I don't know, decades in some cases. And I think that is the problem that I set out to solve so many years ago when I was starting this company, because that last part, the losing yourself part, is the one that we don't talk about overtly, right? In the narrative of work-life balance, in the actual, in work-life balance as a, catchphrase, as a meme, what's missing in that is where does the individual fall in that balance, right? When we are trying to juggle those two things, there's a third thing. There's a third entity that we are really trying to keep in play, and that is ourselves. It is our own health. It is our well-being. It is our sense of individuality. It's the things that make us us. And I think often those are the things that go by the wayside when we are trying to pour sufficient energy into our work and into our people. Okay. So what I've observed in the women who I've worked with over the years and what I've lived out myself is that when your career gets demanding and when your family gets big and complex, whatever that looks like for you, there's this invisible math that starts to happen, right? Because the equation has three variables: work and home and you. And when the first two get heavy enough or big enough, the third one is the one that gets sort of quietly, like almost invisibly sacrificed. And I don't think it happens all at once. I don't think most of us wake up one day and go, well, here's the day I've crossed the threshold, right? There's nothing left for me. It's more of a slippery slope. I think the way it actually plays out in real time is that it's more of a slippery slope. I'll just give a little bit more to work. I've got to stay a little bit later at the office, right? I have to give a little bit more at home because the dynamics are changing. And it's like we very slowly and almost invisibly get crowded out until at some point, there's that book that's been on your nightstand for 3 months with the same bookmark in it. And there's that girls' trip that keeps getting moved, and then it gets moved again, and then it just gets moved to someday, and it hasn't happened, right, in years. And there's that hobby that used to be really life-giving, and you loved it, and you did it regularly, but you haven't touched it since God knows when. Okay, these are not frivolous things. These are not nice to haves and extras. These are the things that make you you. They make you feel like yourself. They make me feel like myself. And when they go away, when you have to live without them for long enough, you notice it. It's not invisible. And it doesn't show up like acute grief, right? It's not like, oh, all of a sudden one day I used to do this 6 days a week and now I don't do it at all. And I feel this acute grief. Like let's say you were a runner and you have an injury and all of a sudden you can't run anymore. That's acute grief. Like, what that feels like because you were doing it full tilt and then you're not doing it at all. That's not really how this works. This works more like it gets chipped away little by little, piece by piece. And so you experience it more like a flatness, right? Like a depletion. Like there's something that's missing, but you can't quite name it. It's like this little hum of resentment that's growing in the background because something in you just knows that you, like the parts of you that you really want to be paying attention to, the parts of you that really deserve attention, they're like kind of like knocking on your door, begging for attention. You're just not getting to them. Right. And it's happening. I don't think I've ever met a person who's oblivious to the fact that this is happening. Right. You're not living under a rock, but the math just doesn't seem to work any other way. And I do think there's a willingness. This isn't necessarily happening to you. There is a willingness. Like we are making choices to take ourselves out of the equation in the name of these other things. Right. There's only so much time. And there's only so much of you and something has to give. And you've decided over and over again that the thing that's going to give is you. And what I want you to hear today is I don't think you have to choose in that way, right? I do think you have to make choices differently. And you have to sort of flip the order in which you're making choices. And that flip is the thing that really changes everything. But I don't think you have to say, I'm going to choose to just put all of my own interests on the shelf for months, years, decades. Okay. I don't. And I don't like what it communicates to our kids when we do that. I think we think we're being good parents, like, oh, I don't need anything at all. But what we're modeling for them is that that's what parenting looks like. I don't want to model that for my kids. I don't want them to think like, hey, in order to be a parent, you have to have no interests of your own. You have to not need anything, not want anything. You just have to be completely sacrificial for, again, like decades. I'm not really here for that. So most women who are in peak complexity seasons of life have adopted a mental model. Like I think we've started looking at the world in a way that we think is completely reasonable, but it's actually the source of the problem. So this is the premise here. The model goes like this. I will handle what needs to be handled for work, probably first. I think for most people, if we're being honest, that's like first dibs. Then I will handle whatever needs to be handled for my people at home. That's like second dibs on your time and energy and attention. And then whatever is left over, if anything is left over, emphasis on the if, that'll be for me. And too often, more often than not, there is nothing left. And so there is nothing for you. So check in with yourself as you hear me say that. Is that true for you? Do you end up in a situation a lot where you are making sure nothing has fallen short at work? You are making sure nothing has fallen short at home for any of your people. And then it's like, oh, is there anything left for me? Maybe this is where I will have some time for me. And yet that time is getting smaller and smaller because you always find your way to the bottom of the list because the list doesn't end, right? It's not that you are not productive. It's not that you don't have a strong work ethic, right? It's that the math doesn't math. There's just structurally not enough time left over to fully handle all of the things you could do or might do for those two kind of groups of people, your colleagues, your team at work and your team at home, so to speak, and still have something. So here's the reframe. What if you decided what was actually necessary for you to feel healthy and whole and human, right? Like the things that make you you, and you put some amount of those in first. And not in a way that is going to like ignore the demands of your career, right? You can't have a 4-hour morning routine. I get that, right? Not in a way that is going to, make it appear that you don't care about your kids, because obviously you do. But what if you just like put some non-negotiables on the calendar that are yours, and then reverse engineer everything around that? So I know, like, I can hear myself as I'm saying it. Some of you are going to be like, that's impossible. That's a fantasy. Yeah, it would be great if I could do that, but I can't. Or even like it does, maybe if it doesn't sound impossible, maybe it sounds irresponsible. Like, who does that? Who puts themselves on the calendar first? But I'm actually suggesting that this does work, because something I've observed over and over again in myself and in the women that I've coached over the years is that when you do draw a hard limit, when you say, I am going to that yoga class, right? Or I am taking that girls' trip, or I am going to meet this person for coffee on Friday morning. When you draw that hard limit, or I am going on vacation and I am not doing work during that vacation, okay, something interesting happens to the rest of the work, which is that it compresses. It fits itself into the available remaining time because it has to. And there's a principle that this is rooted in, called Parkinson's law, that you might have heard of. And I remember teaching my kids about Parkinson's law. The idea is actually pretty simple. It's that work expands to fill the time allotted or the time available for its completion. So if you give yourself a full day to write a report, right, or build a presentation deck in Canva or whatever you're going to do, it's going to take all day. But if you give yourself 2 hours before you have to leave for the airport, then it takes 2 hours. It's remarkable how the work will fill whatever container you've given it. And you've probably seen this happen. You've probably seen it happen in micro form, where you're like, oh, I've got kind of a light day today. That's great. I don't, for some reason, meetings canceled or whatever happened, and I only have these handful of things to do. I'm going to just be swimming in discretionary time. And what happens is every one of those tasks just seems to sort of balloon up and take the time that's left. And you're like, where did my day go? Where did my free day go? Well, it got absorbed. It got elapsed by these things that sort of inflated themselves to fill the time that was available. So that's the micro form, is like the day, the hour, the whatever. But that same thing happens at the scale of a week, or the scale of a season, or the scale of a whole career. If work has unlimited access to your time, it will use it. It will use all of it. And then some. Like, work is an insatiable beast. So if we give it all of our time, it will take it. It is a never-ending list of things that could be done. And by the way, home is kind of the same way. There is an infinite list of things that we could be doing at home, and it will take all of it, right? It will just keep asking and keep taking and keep asking and keep taking. But here's what's the counterintuitive part. When you constrain, like the container, when you say work has to fit into these hours because I have protected this other time, most people discover that the important work still gets done. And they're not necessarily working faster. I mean, you are a little bit, or harder, but that constraint forces a kind of like clarity and prioritization that unlimited time doesn't require. So if you are somebody who has ever done this, like if I worked less than full time at several different stages in my corporate career, and I know I probably got close to, if not the equivalent of full-time work done, because I just knew, well, this is the time I have, and I'm going to make it fit. I'm going to figure out how to imperfect action my way through this. I'm going to learn efficiency tools. I'm going to really prioritize, what do I say yes to and no to? And it's like, if you're careful about the least important things being what fall off the plate, it is incredible. You delegate things that you might have otherwise done yourself because you kind of have to. You decline meetings maybe that don't actually move anything forward. You make faster decisions because you don't have that luxury of like endless deliberation. And the constraint, the addition of the constraint is the game changer. And it doesn't limit your output like you think it's going to. It like sharpens your output, right? It brings focus to what you are actually going to do. I think this is the central thesis of Greg McCune's work in essentialism. So I've talked about that. I've had Greg on the podcast twice. We've talked about this many times. But the central thesis of that work is like, can you choose the most important things? So, and I'm going to tell you, not only does it help you with efficiency and productivity, but the research on creativity actually bears this out as well. Okay. The research on creativity says, I think this is so fascinating. When people are given tighter constraints or more constraints, their creative output goes up. They are more creative in their solutions. So if you give somebody a problem to solve and you don't put any constraints on the way they solve the problem, they actually can get kind of stuck because there's infinite solutions and it can be paralyzing. But if you put some constraints on the problem, their creativity increases. And I always think about that classic scene in Apollo 13, where, they throw all the equipment on the table back at Mission Control, and they're like, we got to connect this to this using this. And he like throws the pile of stuff on the table. That is an example of a constraint. They can't go build something. They had to use the materials that were already on, I'm going to say spaceship. I don't know what to call it. It was already on that, right? They had to use the things that were available to them to solve that problem. And the constraint increases the creativity. Somebody's going to come up with a solution. So we think we want unlimited options. We think we want unlimited time. But having a blank page can be paralyzing. And the constraint is like the forcing function that we didn't know we needed. And that's really the paradox that's at the center of brilliant balance, right? The thing that feels like a limitation can be the thing that finally makes the difference. If you are trying to solve for how do I grow my career and how do I grow my family at the same time without losing myself, you've introduced the constraints. Those are the constraints, right? I need to take care of these people. I need to take care of this work. That's the constraint. I still need to take care of myself. How creatively can I do that? So I'm going to tell you about a client of mine, and I feel like she understood that. She got this, right? She's demonstrated this better than almost anyone I've worked with. And she was growing a business. In fact, she bought a business and then grew it from one location to two and then to three locations while growing her family from 1 to 2 to 3 children. And that was a simultaneous growth curve. Okay. And she came to me when she was expecting her third. That's when we crossed paths. She still only had one physical location. And over time, she had that third child, added a second, added a third. So everything is growing at the same time. The complexity of her family life, the complexity of her business was all increasing at the same time. And several years into our relationship, she came to a session saying, I think I want to take a sabbatical for the summer. Now, when you're a business owner, you don't really take sabbaticals. That's like, they happen in academia all the time. Some companies offer paid sabbaticals after a certain amount of time. Some offer unpaid sabbaticals. But it's really unusual for somebody who is a business owner to come and say, I want to take a sabbatical. And the word felt important to her, right? It wasn't like a vacation. It was, I really want to step back. I don't want to take a few days off. I want to really change gears, and I want to lean into being present for my kids in the way that Summer used to feel before business got so demanding. And this woman runs a big team. This isn't like, oh, I have 3 employees. Like, there are many employees, but she really wanted to be present. She had a sister who had a big life event happening. She wanted to be there for that, not just like squeezing in a quick visit. It was like, I want to be a part of this. But the more that she thought about it, the more it felt impossible. It was like, I don't think this is going to happen. I don't think my team is ready. I don't think they can take on the responsibilities. I don't think I have the leadership structure in place. She had real revenue to attend to. She had real people. She had vacancies to fill. You can't just disappear for a summer when there's people counting on you. There isn't a lot of like planned redundancy at her leadership level in a business of her size. Okay. And so it's harder for people to take leaves when you're in that environment. And so I think she'd reached a point where she was like, I looked at this idea. I think it's impossible, so forget it. It's just off the table. And I asked her a question that I find myself coming back to over and over again in my work, which is, listen, what would have to be true? What would have to be true for you to do this? We didn't say, how do you pull off a full sabbatical? She'd already decided that was not going to happen in the way she'd originally conceived it. But what would have to be true to get the version of a summer that would actually give you what you're longing for? And to her credit, she sat with that question. And this was, again, we were ahead of the summer when she's workshopping this. We probably started this conversation the fall before, like October, November of the year before, had it in earnest during the winter. And it's like, it's not going to happen. And then end of winter, early spring, we're revisiting like, what is possible here? And she came back with like, all right, I don't need to take the whole summer off, but I need a real family vacation, not a working trip where like the family's along and I'm just doing work the whole time, but an actual vacation. I need some version of that slower rhythm of summer that I've kind of envisioned, where I can like go to the pool with the kids and, stay with them, not just like do the quick buzz through, but actually like be a part of it. I want to be in my house with them, I want to make homemade popsicles. Like she had this very specific vision of what she wanted to do. And so she did that. She figured out how to do exactly what she needed. Okay. And so when she worked backwards from those anchors, like if those are the fixed points, these are the things that I want to be able to build in, what would my surrounding schedule have to look like to make that possible? And what she designed wasn't like her normal summer where she would be working 5 days a week, traditional business hours, but it also wasn't, I'm going to take 3 months off. So I think, and I might get a few of these details wrong, but I think she took like at least a week every month fully off. So she just kind of went through her calendar in advance and was like, I'm going to be out of the office these weeks. She moved to, I think, 4-day work weeks for the rest of the weeks, for the duration of the summer, protected certain hours in the mornings for the kids. There were some other things baked into this as well, but she got very specific about what that summer was going to look like. And then she went and equipped her team to say, how do we deliver on this? And she got her family set up to say, how do we deliver on this, right? Her husband and the kids, everybody had to buy in to like, what is this going to look like? And here's the other thing that was wild about it, is that when she went to her team to talk about how to do this, she had to do things within the team that she had been putting off, right? There was a delegation infrastructure that had to be put in place so that people knew who to go to in her absence. She had to give her team ownership of some things that she had been resisting giving up. They should create some systems in order for that to happen. And she had to make like decisions that she'd been avoiding. Again, this is where that constraint starts kind of boosting creativity, because there was a big why behind it. To be able to get this thing I really want, I need to like stop running on autopilot. And I have to take that constraint and use it to like force my hand. And I think she would tell you it was a very important season in her professional life and her family life. And yes, she worked less than she typically would, but also because it enabled her to build this infrastructure that she had even in the fall when she went back to working full time. So, that's a permanent improvement that came out of this season of transition. And I want to be transparent about this because I think it's important. This client had real support around her as she was making these decisions. She in particular was a part of Bold, which is like my private advisory circle, which meant she was in a room full of accomplished women helping her think it through, right? Pushing back on her assumptions, telling her what had worked in their lives, holding her accountable to what she said she actually wanted. Like those people couldn't make the decisions for her, but it made it a lot harder to talk herself out of them, right? She had me in her corner, like providing really tangible advice and perspective. And so that thought partnership allowed it to not just be like lost in a journaling exercise or a wouldn't it be nice? It was like, this is a real problem we're going to solve for. And we're going to put support around you, and we're going to hold you accountable to not just walking away from it when it gets a little challenging. We're going to hold through to the end. So I think that is an important factor here, that sometimes it is very hard to get us to do things that are not traditional or we aren't seeing other people doing when we feel like we're the only one. When we're trying to solve the whole thing all by ourselves, I think that's very hard. So, when you really want to make a big change, you might want to think about, how do I bring in some outside perspective to help me think through what it would look like? Maybe somebody who's done it before, maybe somebody who does sit in that professional advisory role, maybe a peer group that can help you workshop some of the things that you have that seem like a dream, but that actually could have reality around them. Okay. So I want to give you something concrete in your life as you think about this. I want you to think about not taking a sabbatical per se. Maybe that's a high water mark for you, but thinking about what would give me a little bit more space for myself and the things that I actually care about. What are the things you care about? Sometimes I ask women, what do you like to do? And they're like, they stare back at me kind of wide-eyed and open-mouthed, right? They have no idea, because it's been so long since they've done some of the things that they really love and care about. So a great starting point is just, can you list things that you like to do? Do you remember the things that you like to do that maybe you used to do before life got so complicated? Are there things that you haven't yet been able to do that you're genuinely curious about exploring or trying, right? So the more specific, the better. It's one thing to say, I want to exercise. And, I say this all the time. If I had $1 for every woman who told me she wants to exercise more, I would retire. Okay. But specifically, like, I want to try hot Pilates. I want to try, I don't know, horseback riding. Like, I have something that I want to do that's very specific. Your ability to harness your motivation to create time and space for it will be so much greater if it is specific than if it is generic. Okay. There's travel involved, a particular place you want to go. Maybe there's a creative outlet, like a particular hobby that you want to reconnect with, a particular friend that you want to spend time with, not just like, oh, I want to see my friends, but I want to see this person and I'm going to schedule a lunch with her. Right? The specificity, most of us know what these things are. They're not mysteries. They're things that we probably did before or we're super curious about. And the obstacle isn't having an awareness. It's the habit we're in of treating those things as optional. We're telling ourselves like, oh, that's the reward when everything gets done, when life settles down. We got to figure out how to put some of those things back in. So for now, just figure out what they are. You don't even have to figure out how to schedule them yet. Just know what they are and then commit to getting some support to figure out what would have to be true. Okay. In my experience, having done this practice with hundreds of women, two things happen. The most important work still gets done. You will figure out how to get the most important things at work done, and the needs of your family will not be ignored. You will not just become somebody who completely starts ignoring the needs of your family. What happens is you will protect enough that the constraints will start to give you information. Okay. If you're learning, wow, in order to do this thing that I really care about, I would not be able to get this particular project done at work, or I would not be able to do this particular thing every single time at home. It starts to give you information about what might have to get reoriented in either of those two arenas so that you can protect enough for you. So in order to have your career and your family in this season of growth at the same time, what I'm referring to is peak complexity. If you're navigating that season, what's not an option is just to say, I will get to myself later. That leads nowhere good, right? You will be a better parent and you will be better at work if there is some amount of time that is protected for you to do the things that matter to you. The goal is never some kind of perfect artificial balance, right? The goal is a life that has room for you in the middle of it, right? The career growing alongside your family and you not getting squished in the middle of all that. So if you're in a season right now where you are trying to figure this out, right? This is the problem that is keeping you up at night. You're thinking about it all day. I want you to know you don't have to do this alone. You just don't. Like, this is what this community is all about. So please let people support you. Easy thing to do with me is to schedule an exploratory call. This is where you can ask me whatever the specifics are about your situation and see if there is something in this brilliant balance bag of tricks that I can bring to the party that would help you. You may not even know that there are options available here to you that would be extremely helpful in solving for some of these challenges. You have seen it one time, right? You are N equals 1 in your life, but I have seen this hundreds of times. So to see the patterns and to see, oh, I know what works in this pattern, and to just kind of open that door for you, that is a pleasure, right? And it is why I wake up every day, is to get the chance to do that. So if that's something that's intriguing, I'll put the link in the show notes. You can book an exploratory call and understand like what would support look like in this world. And you can also have those conversations with the people in your everyday life. But please absolve yourself from the belief that you need to figure this all out on your own. Okay. And as always, I say this regularly. If today's episode made you think of someone else in your life, like there's someone else where you're like, I know who needs to hear this, be generous, put it in her hands, right? You for sure have someone in your life who is quietly trying to do it all and losing herself in the process. Send it to her. It might be exactly what she needs to hear, and she will be so grateful to you, and I will be so grateful to be connected. So that is all for today, my friends. Until next time, let's be brilliant.